Я думаю, к этому невозможно подготовиться.
Подаляк тут, президент тут. Всі ми тут.
Шановні громадяни України, сьогодні вранці президент Путін...
Er kann wunderbar mit Medien umgehen. Er weiß, wie er mit Kamera arbeitet. Er weiß ganz genau, also wie das funktioniert, und er kann das glänzend umsetzen.
Всім доброго ранку, українці. Зараз в мережі дуже багато з'явилось фейкової інформації, що...
Stanno aspettando, guarda, devono arrivare tutti quanti. Sono tutti così da aspettare. Ma secondo me l'hanno fatto apposta social per ritardare di un'ora, per i piani e tutto, perché mi sa che c'è proprio lui, perché ho visto qualcuno in questa evidenza. giorno. Ancora no, però sono entrati i premiati degli anni scorsi adesso. Lo so. No, perdere anche 2 volte sono arrivato.
Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, ich begrüße Sie heute im Krönungssaal unseres Rathauses ganz herzlich zur Verleihung des Internationalen Karlspreises zu Aachen 2023 an das ukrainische Volk mit seinem Präsidenten, seiner Exzellenz Volodymyr Zelensky.
Today, in the presence of the Minister of Exterior, ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, dear Prime Minister Morawiecki, and a warm welcome to the institutions of the European Union, the President of the European Parliament, Mrs. Metsola, and the President of the Commission, Mrs. von der Leyen. We are also pleased to welcome the representatives of the constitutional institutions of the German Federation, Mrs. Barth, Chancellor Scholz, and Minister of State Roth, and the President of the Federal Constitutional Court, Professor Dr. Habart. We welcome the Excellencies, the ambassadors of Bulgaria, Croatia, Lithuania, the Netherlands, the United States of America, Latvia, France, Ukraine, and Poland, as well as all members of the Consular Corps. A very warm welcome goes to the state of North Rhine-Westphalia and its state premier, Wüst, State Parliament President Cooper, and the members of the state government and the state parliament, as well as the former prime ministers of our state, Jürgen Rüttgers and Armin Laschet. A very warm welcome also to all members of the German Bundestag and the European Parliament. It is a great pleasure for me to welcome the numerous former Charlemagne Prize laureates among us, Mrs. Dalia Grybauskaite and Martin Schulz, as well as last year's laureates, Mrs. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, Veronika Tsepkalo, and Tatiana Komich, who represents her sister Maria Kolesnikova here. A warm welcome goes to the representatives of the churches and faith communities, and especially to the Ukrainian Nobel Peace Prize laureate Alexandra Matvichuk. Welcome to Aachen. I welcome the members of the bodies of our Charlemagne Prize with former Lord Mayor Dr. Jürgen Linden as the chairman of the board for the conferring of the Charlemagne Prize. Since the attack on Ukraine in February 2022, which is in breach of international law, we have been talking in Europe about a turning point in time. The Ukrainian people, who have been fighting for their sovereignty since the end of the Soviet Union, who've always been clearly committed to the liberal and democratic values of the European Union, and who have been striving for membership in the European Union since the 1990s, are being hit hard by the consequences of this turning point. This brutal Russian war of aggression against Ukraine has been going on for over a year now, and many of us have already become accustomed to it, to the daily reports of terror, arms deliveries, to ever new threats from the Russian side. But as much as this news has become part of our everyday life, it remains our task to make sure that the people who are directly affected by this war are not forgotten. It is our duty to constantly remind ourselves that in our Europe, a whole people is being denied a life in peace and freedom. An entire generation is being deprived of its childhood, youth, opportunities and dreams. That is why we should remember, especially today, that there are individual destinies behind each of these horror stories. On the occasion of conferring the Charlemagne Prize to you, Your Excellency Zelensky, and to the Ukrainian people, I would like to take a moment to reflect on the situation of some people off the big political stage today. In Ukraine, and also here in Aachen, and to give them a face and a voice. They deserve this. Two of these people present today are Anna Kysil and Julia Pich. They represent the Association of Ukrainians in Aachen. Both women, when the war started, immediately recognized the giant tasks lying ahead of us, and together with other committed citizens, they founded the Association Ukrainians in Aachen. Both women have been living in Germany for a long time and in Aachen, and since this war started, they've been in constant fear, worrying about their parents, siblings, and friends in Ukraine. Since the war, their lives have changed completely. With great passion, they helped to find accommodation for Ukrainian war refugees, collected and transported humanitarian aid supplies, and called for demonstrations. In the meantime, this has developed into much more. The association organizes language courses, is committed to cultural exchange, and wants to preserve Ukrainian history, culture, and tradition as an anchor for the refugees, and at the same time wants to familiarize Aachen citizens with them. Ukrainians in Aachen is today a reliable partner for all actors thanks to the sustained efforts of its founders. The association has contributed to making our city a safe haven for war refugees from the very beginning. And for this, we would like to thank him wholeheartedly. One of them is Julia Hryvniova. With her children and her husband, she was one of the first Ukrainian refugee families to come to Aachen, and I would also like to welcome her especially warmly today. The story of Julia Hryvniova and her family is representative of countless others. Forced to flee their homeland once before due to the annexation of Crimea in 2014, the family was able to build a new home and a new life in Bucha near Kiev. Until history was repeating for them cruelly with Russia's renewed invasion. Once again, she and her children had to leave their home in a hurry. But already on the run, the next horrible news reached them. While trying to leave Bucha, which had been occupied in the meantime, the car of Julia's parents was shot at by Russian soldiers. Her mother died. Her father survived, seriously injured. And although Julia has experienced immeasurable suffering and her family's future prospects are still extremely uncertain, she has been tirelessly involved in humanitarian aid since her arrival in Aachen, and she advises people who want to flee Ukraine. Together with her sister Oksana, she founded the initiative Sokil in Ukraine, which evacuates old and disabled people from the front and has thus already helped many people to find a new home and to survive. Also with the help of the Association Ukrainians in Aachen, the Hryniova family has integrated here, learned a new language, found an apartment and schooling for their children. However, her husband has returned to help on the ground. Like him, the entire family has not given up Ukraine. It is still their homeland to which they want to return. Many Ukrainians feel the same way as Julia Hryniova and her family. Therefore, after providing immediate support from the beginning, it was our special task to offer the people, in addition to the said safe haven, perspectives beyond the war. This enables them to enjoy a life in freedom again, here with us or in their homeland. Together with countless organizations, initiatives, associations, and volunteers, we have created these perspectives and will continue to do so in future, side by side and in direct exchange with the Ukrainians, be it on a local level, as just described, on a national and international level, or on a municipal level within the framework of the solidarity-based city partnership. We are currently building such a partnership with Chernihiv, a city in the north of Ukraine, which, in addition to its current population and infrastructure, has another parallel to Aachen. Albeit to the Aachen that the founding fathers of the Charlemagne Prize described in their proclamation of 1949, and they described it as follows. After 2 world wars in which the border situation of our city had a particularly detrimental effect, in which the honest efforts of several generations to overcome imaginary national antagonisms proved to be in vain, our city, which has sunk into ruins, is struggling for its right to live. Just as Aachen, back then, Chernihiv, is today to a large extent destroyed. Therefore, we enter into this partnership not only to express our unconditional solidarity in this way, but above all, to support Chernihiv and its inhabitants in their efforts to rebuild their city as a sustainable city and to make it their home again. Our concrete cooperation will start tomorrow with the representatives, and I'm so happy to have the Lord Mayor from Chernihiv amongst us. The fact that the possibility of returning home still exists, that families like Julia Hryniovas can still dream of a future in freedom in their homeland, and that people, whether in Ukraine, throughout Europe, or here with us, still have any hope at all for an end to this conflict, would probably not be possible without the man whom we are honoring today, together with the Ukrainian people, with the Charlemagne Prize, the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky shows courage, leadership, tactical sensitivity, and he demonstrates a new, clear and unambiguous political style. The citation reads, among other things, and further, he is a support and also a role model for his people. He stands against hopelessness and despair, and for the confidence, the goal of a free, independent and sovereign Ukraine, which is part of the European family of nations. Zelensky gives strength to Ukraine, but also to the European Union to believe in this ideal. In this respect, he's also a role model for all Europeans to remember European ideals and values. All of you sitting here today document by your presence that Europe can be relied upon. As I've just described, we are assuming our responsibility by preparing together for the time after. Because as you, President Zelensky, hold your people together and give them strength and confidence in the greatest crisis, you show us with your personality and determination not only how we can stand together for Europe and freedom, but you also give us confidence that you will find a way together with us in the same way to give the Ukrainian people a peaceful and democratic future. We stand by your side, by the side of the Ukrainian people.
Dear citizens of Ukraine, dear President Zelensky, dear Volodymyr, dear Lord Mayor Kuipen, dear Chairman Dr. Linden, dear Jürgen, dear President of the Commission, dear Ursula, dear Prime Minister, dear Mateusz, ladies and gentlemen. President Tusk, those were the words, dear Mr. President, dear Volodymyr, that you said, quoted in one of the first video messages concerning the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The President is here. We are all here. On the early in the morning of the 25th of February 2022, this is when you said this. Together, standing in the center of Kiev. And you added, all of us will defend our independence, and that will be how things remain. It's very rare in history that such brief words have had such an effect. It was immediately clear the Ukrainian people will not give in to Russian violence. The Ukrainian people will survive. And it's for this reason alone that we can be together here in Aachen today. Europe has a lot to thank the Ukrainian people for, and in particular this President, Mr. Zelensky. When the founders of the Charlemagne Prize in 1949 came up with the idea of the prize, many parts of Europe were lying in ruins. The terrible experience of 2 world wars, the violations of human rights, hunger, poverty, and great sadness were all very present. Europe living in peace and freedom was a vision for the distant future. However, the founding fathers of the Charlemagne Prize saw their dream realized more and more each year. The list of laureates reads like a who's who of European integration. It ranges from Jean Monnet, Konrad Adenauer, Robert Schuman, Simon Weil, through to Václav Havel and Branislav Kilimnik. Men and women who have been driven by courage to push ahead with what many of us consider to be a matter of course, the peaceful development of Europe that makes the prosperity and peace of our people possible in the first place. But today, once again, we have a terrible war of aggression. Russia's terrible war of aggression, a war which for the people of Ukraine is painful, demands sacrifices like we could not imagine, a war that is against everything for which Europe today stands, and also a war which for Ukraine, for Europe and its member states shows very clearly we are standing together, we belong together, and our history will carry on together. For the first time, the Charlemagne Prize is being awarded this year to a president and to his people. I think this is an exceptionally clever decision, because the Ukrainian people and you, my dear Volodymyr, together, starting on the 24th of February 2022, you have been achieving unbelievable things, tremendous bravery. You're defending your land with tremendous bravery against the aggressor Russian. Every day people are defying the Russian aggression through their efforts. Russia's war of aggression has brought Ukrainian people and Europe together like never before. We stand together in solidarity at the side of Ukraine. Germany has taken up more than 1 million Ukrainian citizens. Poland has taken in over 1.5 million, and Czech Republic over 500,000. The number of Ukrainian-German twinning associations has doubled, and throughout Europe, the war has made one thing very clear: Ukraine is part of the European family. As France's president said, Italy's then Prime Minister Mario Draghi, Romania's President Klaus Iohannis, and myself, when we visited Kiev together, we emphasized this, and we stand by this statement again today. Russia and Ukraine are not one people, as President Putin claims in his imperialistic and colonialistic rhetoric. The Ukrainian nation has its own long history, its unbelievably diverse own culture, its own traditions, its own identity. Following the breakdown of the Soviet Union, Ukrainians have been fighting for the right to determine their own future themselves. And Ukraine has taken its decision, a decision in favor of Europe. Dear Volodymyr Zelensky, on the road to the European Union, Ukraine will have our full support. As Europeans, we know what energy is incorporated in the democratic will of the people. I think about Solidarność in Poland. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, brought about by courageous citizens of the GDR, and then the unification of Germany and Europe in the years thereafter. And of course, I also think about the Orange Revolution in Ukraine in 2004, and the winter nights in the Maidan in 2013, 2014. During this revolution of dignity, the blue-yellow flags of Ukraine and the blue and yellow flags of Europe became symbols of the freedom and self-determination of Ukraine. All of these popular movements demonstrate the strong will of people to determine their own futures themselves. Russia's war of aggression has not only strengthened Ukrainians' will as a political nation, it has also strengthened the will of the Ukrainian people to become a European nation. If Vladimir Putin believed that he would be able to bring Ukraine away from its path with his violence, and all his tanks, his rocket missiles have brought about nothing but the exact opposite. The European Union stands for peaceful coexistence by the people of Europe, for the political and economic cooperation between our member states, and for the beauty of cultural and linguistic diversity. The European Union stands for freedom and democracy, for the rule of law and protection of human rights, and in particular for the reconciliation between previous enemies. I'm very well aware of this as a German Chancellor, and that's what distinguishes us as Europeans. Therefore, every day we must pay attention to ensuring that the values of democracy, freedom and peace are maintained even within the EU. This striving for democracy, for rule of law, for freedom is also shared by the Ukrainian people. Dear Volodymyr, servants of the people, this is the claim with which you began your role as President of Ukraine. And you are precisely that today. When it comes to receiving the Charlemagne Prize on behalf of your people, the resistance and the desire for freedom inspire hope well beyond Ukraine. At the head of the Ukrainian people, you defend the values for which Europe stands. The Ukrainians can rely on our full support, humanitarian, economic support, weapons, and above all, in the long term. In 1986, the people of Luxembourg were the first people to receive the Charlemagne Prize. The text on the medal said, "The people of Luxembourg, a role model and perseverance on the way to a unified Europe." And this sentence, this phrase, is just as applicable today to the people of Ukraine. So today's conferring of the Charlemagne Prize does not represent an end point, but a beginning. The start of our new growing together in Europe, together with Ukraine, with the Western Balkan states, Moldova, Georgia. Given the change, the turn of the times, our message is clear. Europe is united and together. The Charlemagne Prize, as a prize for European citizens, means deep respect of our free societies towards the bravery and courage of the Ukrainian people and their president. Ukraine is here, and Ukraine is Europe. Congratulations, and Slava Ukraina.
dear President Zelensky, dear Volodymyr, Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Prime Minister Morawiecki, dear Mayor Sibylle Kuipen, dear Dr. Linden, ladies and gentlemen. When you enter the city of Aachen and look at the wealth of ancient landmarks and monuments, you can almost feel with all of the senses the weight of European history, its violence and its beauty, its pain and its progress, its centuries-old divisions and its decades-young unity. This prize, as the founder Kurt Pfeiffer put it, embodies an obligation of the highest ethical value to make the next chapter of our common history better than the last one. That obligation is for a strong union of Europeans, quote, to defend the highest earthly goods, freedom, humanity, and peace, and safeguard the future of the children and children's children, unquote. The person and the people that we are recognizing today have lived up to that obligation that any one of us ever could. They are literally fighting for freedom, humanity, and peace. They are bleeding and they are laying down their lives to safeguard the future of their children and of ours. President Zelensky and the people of Ukraine know exactly what they're fighting for, and they have understood what Europe and our union is all about. My words cannot really do justice to this. Well, far from it, but those of President Zelensky can. In his remarkable inauguration address in 2019, he told the people of Ukraine, and I quote, "We have chosen a path to Europe, but Europe is not somewhere out there. Europe is here, in our minds, and after it has appeared here once, it will be everywhere, all over Ukraine," unquote. President Zelensky, Volodymyr, I am firmly convinced that those words will come true, and we will not stop working to make sure they do. Ladies and gentlemen, the story of pain comes with strength and courage. Ukraine has shown this every single day since that fateful morning when Russia sent tank columns and tens of thousands of soldiers across the border. When I met Volodymyr Zelensky in a shell-shocked Kiev a few weeks later, in the government neighborhood, I had just come back from Bucha. I had just seen the mass graves next to the church, the body bags lined up tightly together, the early cruel symbols of Putin's war. I will never forget the image of those innumerable candles everywhere, each of which represented a mother or a father, a son or a daughter, a brother or a sister, alive, senselessly extinguished. people's feelings were despair and anger. But they also had a firm belief, the belief that Ukraine was fighting back and turning the tide. When I spoke to President Zelensky in those early days, I called him many times, and I knew about his courage and his determination in those bleak early days. But on that day in Kiev, when I looked into his eyes for the first time, I was deeply touched by the steadfast determination he exuded. President Zelensky had and has the unshakable belief that those fighting for something will always be stronger than those fighting to impose their rule. And this is why, because of this courage and this determination, the victims and the values, I cannot think of a more befitting winner of this Charlemagne Prize than President Zelensky and the people of Ukraine. President Zelensky and the people of Ukraine are fighting for exactly the values and the obligation that this prize embodies. And in doing so, they're also fighting for our own freedom and our values, democracy and the rule of law, free speech, and the freedom to create your own destiny. This is what Ukraine is fighting for. And this is what President Putin is trying to extinguish. President Putin is destroying the work of peace that we have built together since the end of the Second World War and later after the fall of the Iron Curtain. Putin aims to destroy the Europe created by Charlemagne Prize laureates such as Guy Lafon and Václav Havel, François Mitterrand and Helmut Kohl, and many others. Putin tries to unravel the events of 1989 and the decades since, which saw the people of Europe tear down the Iron Curtain and Europe changed its face forever. As historian and Charlemagne Prize laureate Timothy Garton Ash put it so well. Every generation has its moment when it has to stand up to defend democracy and what it believes in. For us, this moment has come. And just as the courageous freedom fighters changed the face of our continent in Europe a little more than 30 years ago, today it is us, our actions, that will decide what our Europe will look like in future. The Ukrainian people have revealed to the world the strength of their society, their will to fight and to be free. This has amazed the world. Their ironclad certainty where they belong is fascinating. It's an inspiration for all of us. For a decade, the civil society people in the Ukraine have been the architect of our Ukraine's move towards the European Union. And never can we match the sacrifice and the bravery of the Ukrainian people. But we can stand firmly by their side. I'm not just talking about the tens of billions of euros of support to Ukraine, the sweeping sanctions against Russia, or the modern weapons and ammunition that we have pledged and delivered. I am also talking about accompanying Ukraine on its path towards our union and getting it ready for the future, even though the war is raging. I'm thinking also of the countless Europeans who've opened their homes and their hearts for Ukrainian refugees. 4 million people have found temporary shelter after leaving their homeland because of Putin's bombs. And I would like to thank and recognize the many volunteers. I would like to pay my respect to the cities and municipalities, the teachers and sports clubs who integrated Ukrainian children into their groups, and the countless enterprises that gave work to their parents. This is Europe at its best. Ladies and gentlemen, it is thanks to President Zelensky, thanks to the people of Ukraine, and thanks to all of us sticking together that Europe's face is changing once again. Ukraine incarnates everything the European idea is standing for. The courage to stand in for one's convictions, the fight for values and freedom, the commitment and the struggle for peace and unity. This is why I'm convinced that Ukraine will prevail. It will win peace and make its European destiny come true as part of our European family. Dear Alexandra Matvichuk, you, a few days ago in Vienna, said the following, and I quote, "People in Ukraine want peace more than anyone else, but peace does not come when the country that was attacked lays down its weapons. That's not peace. That's occupation. And occupation is just war in another form, just as bad as war." Unquote. You are so right. In our EU, we speak many different languages, 24 of them. But in all of them, victory translates as peace and justice. Just peace. As has always been the case with Europe, there will be skeptics saying that it is impossible, it's a fantasy. But what if this is in fact our duty, our task to unite and make the impossible possible against all odds? Those words are again from President Zelensky. We speak of a victory, he said, when the guns fall silent and people are raising their voices. Unquote. He was back then talking about Ukraine. But these words also describe Europe and what it stands for, our Europe. So what if this was our idea? If it was our task of our Europeans to stand together and make the impossible possible? With today's prize, we are sending out a clear message. We stand by the side of President Zelensky. We stand by the side of the people in Ukraine. We stand by their side until we together achieve the impossible. Slava Ukraina. Long live Europe.
Charlemagne also to reflect on the sources of our Europeanness. Who are we? Who do we wish to avoid becoming? Let us look for answers to these questions. If we want to describe the history of Europe in the last decades of the 20th century as briefly as possible, we can use the concepts of disintegration and reunification. The Polish movement of solidarity, and the fall of the Berlin Wall became a symbol not only of the fall of the totalitarian communist system, but also of the reunification of the whole of Europe. The collapse of the Soviet Union was the beginning of a journey of the nations of our region towards unity in a common Europe. Annexed territories were returned to their rightful owners. And the nations of Europe could finally be returned to Europe. What Europe means? Europe means cooperation above competition and unity in diversity. The collapse of the Russian Communist Empire allowed a release of energy and hope that had been suppressed for many decades of enslavement. All nations hope for freedom, sovereignty, and security. Europe should also resemble a local community. If a fire breaks out, neighbors come to each other's mutual aid. If someone gets sick, no one turns their back on them. The strength of European civilization is cooperation, its foundation is solidarity, and its heart and driving force are the desire for freedom. Europe is not just an old continent, a museum of beautiful ideas and values. Europe is a living community with a very rich cultural heritage that has radiated across the world for centuries. Enlightenment thinkers in the service of absolutist powers divided Europe into East and West. This division was meant to justify the exploitation of Central and Eastern Europe by Imperial Russia and give Westerners peace of conscience and a sense of moral superiority. We need to revise that division. There is no place for the image of an uncivilized East to which someone, preferably a strong man, a tyrant in the Kremlin, must bring order. Today, the uncivilized East is a barbaric Moscow that has become an inhumane land. Neither Ukraine nor any Eastern European country is a brother nation, inverted commas, of Russia. It is not brotherhood, but centuries of exploitation, colonialization, and imperialism. The ancestors of today's Poles, Ukrainians, and citizens of many other nations lived in a common state. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was a political project that integrated various nations within one organism. Although it was an unfinished project, it was in fact one of the first attempts to build European unity, in a peaceful way. Let us recall the words of Robert Schuman. He wrote that a united Europe remains accessible to anyone who wishes to join it. Its raison d'être is solidarity and international cooperation. Now let me say a few words on Volodymyr Zelensky, hero of Ukraine, role model for Europe. Not since Winston Churchill walked the streets of London during the Nazi bombing has the West had a leader who has so unquestionably risked his own life to defend his homeland. Volodymyr Zelensky did not listen to those who advised him to leave Kiev. We all remember his words, "The fight is here. I need ammunition, not a ride." This call has not lost its relevance to this day. In the first hours of the invasion, it became clear that Volodymyr Zelensky was a great European leader. He became a true hero within 24 hours. Volodymyr Zelensky is the most outstanding leader on an international scale in the 21st century. His bravery has reminded European Union leaders of the importance of sovereignty and independence. It is a value for which nations are ready to shed blood in the 21st century. Were it not for the heroic attitude of Volodymyr Zelensky, the European Union would now share a very long border with Russia. Putin would have gained the opportunity to destabilize not only our region, but all of Europe. President Zelensky is a role model for every political leader. We can learn from him what true leadership is all about. The war in Ukraine is an opportunity for the nations of Europe to engage in reflection. How can it return to the foundations of a united Europe? There would possibly be no war if the temptation of domination had not prevailed over the principle of equality. Hence, it is so important that we all show true solidarity, and despite differences, such solidarity is shown by the European Council and the European Commission. I want to thank Ursula and Roberta and all other leaders for your determination and perseverance towards Ukraine, and ask for more. Our European humanism too often went hand in hand with willingness to make a pact with evil. Compromise and appeasement in such a context only prolongs conflicts and the suffering that dictators inflict on innocent people. This was the case of Hitler prior to the Second World War. This was the case of Putin after Georgia and Donbass and Crimea 2014. The attitude of the Ukrainian people, the solidarity of Poles with their neighbors, and finally the decisive response of the European Union to the call of defending Ukraine have proven that the greatness of Europe is still alive and well. It is the ability to reach consensus, to get rid of the temptation of domination by the strong over the weak, that distinguishes the free nations of Europe from Russia's empire of evil. In Europe, there is no longer masters and subjects, no longer a center and its periphery. There is also no room for hegemony. Ukraine longs for such a Europe, a community of sovereign nations. President Zeleński reminds us that every nation's voice should be listened to with equal attention. Russia is anti-Europe, the antithesis of the Commonwealth. Its barbaric attack on Ukraine reminded us that political thinking does not invalidate moral categories. The war is a manifestation of the eternal conflict between good and evil. Good has the face of Volodymyr Zelensky and the defenders of Ukraine. Europe upholds the dignity of the human person, freedom of speech, and the separation of religious and temporal powers. In Russia, these values have been trampled. In Russia, the citizen is a mere pawn, speaking the truth as a crime pursued by the censors, and the church is an organ of the state. Europe must resist Russia, because Russia today is the negation of Europe. In Russia, the order of values has been overturned completely. Lying is called truth. Ukrainians are called Nazis. Enslavement is called liberation. And an unwarranted invasion is called a special operation. Russia's legacy is only common misery, common enslavement, and common suffering. Finally, we must not lose sight of the vision of a Europe united but rich in diversity, a Europe in which all countries, regardless of their size and economic potential, have equal rights. Finally, of a Europe bound together by solidarity. Dear Volodymyr, when we came to the besieged Kiev 2.5 weeks of the war, I assured you we would not abandon you. It was your personal courage and fortitude which was key to defending Ukraine, and therefore today's ceremony is one of the symbolic examples of Ukraine's integration into the European family. Europe will only become fully united when Ukraine joins us as full-fledged members of the European Union. I know it is your dream, and it is our desire too. As long as Ukraine is divided, Europe is divided. As long as Ukrainians give their lives for our freedom, the heart of Europe bleeds. We must also not forget the thousands of Ukrainian children kidnapped by Russia. As we express the hope that Ukraine will soon be free, we speak also for them. Today, once again, we as a European community stand before a test. We must learn from the harsh lessons of history, now, before it is too late. Let's give today's winner something more than a prize. Let's give Volodymyr and the Ukrainian nation our full support. Only in this way will we truly strengthen peace and security in Europe. Volodymyr Zelensky is the man who reminded us that the president is more than an office. It is to be with his people to death and life. In the center of Berlin, there was a sign, "Das ist nicht unser Krieg." This is not our war. One word of that sign was changed by someone, and it now says, "Das ist auch unser Krieg." This is also our war. The anonymous graffiti expressed what too many people are still afraid to admit. Yes, this war concerns us all. This war will decide what kind of Europe our children will live in. Will it be a Europe that has shattered the legacy of freedom, or the Europe that restored order to the world? This is perhaps the most important test of our lives. And we are running out of time. Volodymyr Zelensky and his nation need our action here and now. Let us stand for freedom. Let us stand for Ukraine. Let us stand for Europe. Thank you.
Am 14. Mai 2023 wurde im Krönungssaal des Aachener Rathauses, der ehemaligen Kaiserpfalz, der internationale Karlspreis zu Aachen an den Präsidenten der Ukraine, seine Exzellenz Volodymyr Zelensky und das ukrainische Volk verliehen, in Würdigung ihres mutigen Kampfes für Freiheit, Selbstbestimmung, Demokratie und die Verteidigung unserer europäischen Werte. Wir gratulieren sehr herzlich.
Thank you so much. Great honor to be here. Madam Mayor, Mr. Linden, dear Olaf, dear Ursula, Mateusz, Roberta, dear colleagues, thank you very much. Thank you for your kind words about Ukraine. First of all, about Ukraine and our heroes and our soldiers and our children. Thank you very much. My appreciation. They are real heroes. Thank you so much. Thank you for Europe, which is now finally able to fulfill the dream that was laid at the basis of European unity. It is an honor for me to represent the Ukrainian people today, here, and each day. Millions of people who are fighting, working for our values and for our freedom and for our free Europe. All Ukrainians, each of our heroes deserve to stand here and to receive this award. But since the millions of people just will not fit in this hall, let our language, which represents all our people, be spoken here today. The Ukrainian language has never been spoken in these walls by the awardee. And now, when Ukraine is returning to its native European home, I believe that the Ukrainian language will be spoken here on many occasions from now, while recognizing special contribution to the European unity. Ukrainians will always make Europe stronger. You have to prepare. I will continue in Ukrainian. Technically. Thanks so much. Or maybe you began to learn. That's great news. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Усі, хто присутні в цій залі, усі, хто разом з нами захищає свободу Європи, усі ми більше, ніж лідери і політики, громадські.
Public figures and diplomats. We're all the founders of peace. Exactly founders of peace. This is our primary duty to our countries, to our Europe, and to our history. It is peace. It is peace that we will bequeath to our children and grandchildren as a legacy of today. We do not have and do not want any other alternative. But to leave peace as a legacy, we must reach the day when we can say that we're ending this war with our joint victory. Dear Europeans, history is built on victories, although it also remembers defeats. There have been illusions that there are other bricks for history than victories, but such illusions have resulted in the disappearance, or at best, many years of silence in the history of those who who profess them. Illusions turn into deaths. The peace of our parents' generation is the peace left to them by those who defeated the penultimate great aggression in Europe. And the peace of our children's generation is the peace that we are gaining now in the battles right now against the latest aggression in Europe. The battles are taking place and ongoing at a distance of more than 2,000 kilometers from Aachen, on the land of Ukraine, in our skies and the Black Sea, and in European destiny. This battlefield is the fate of Europe. Today's Russia has waged aggression not only against us as a free state, not only against a united Europe as a global symbol of peace and prosperity, but also against the past. By taking over kilometers of Ukrainian territory, Russia was trying to overcome years of European history, the history of ours, jointly, of the 73 years that the Charlemagne Prize has been awarded here. We're faced with an aggressor who's willing to commit any cruelty and meanness. We're faced with an aggressor who's willing to commit any cruelty and meanness, and to claim that history allegedly does not change, that it will be the same as it was before, and it will be the same again, as if whoever has the power has the territory, as if whoever is capable of greater meanness has more rights to Europe, as if civility is worthless. This is what Russia is manifesting with this genocidal aggression. We are faced with an aggressor for whom our common European aspiration for peace and rules means nothing, and who wants Europe to have something that no free nation, no honest leader, no one in this room will accept ever. You and I, we all are united in the belief that Europe and all other parts of the world should not be a place where the ambitions of tyrants destroy the lives of peoples. We must become winners, so that our view and we must become winners so that our view of life remains in Europe. Dear Europe, Ukraine offers you victory that will be peace and will save you. Ukraine offers a victory not just in this one war, but over aggressions, over annexations, over burning down these cities, deportations, the catastrophe of genocide, anywhere else on earth. We're offering and bringing closer a common victory over the one who has brought all this old evil from the pages of the past in order to destroy our future, which we all, the whole of Europe, dream of for our children. Russia has chosen the path of evil, of its own free will. Our will is enough to cut off this path and the path of any similar aggressors who might someday try to follow Russia and repeat what Russia is doing. We will fulfill this task, all of us together. Dear Olaf, I'm personally addressing you and through you to the entire country, this potential nation of yours, Germany, Ukraine and the whole of Europe. We respect your choice to be for Europe, to be with Europe. When you saw the Zeitenwende, you acted as a defender of Europe should. Europe will always be grateful to you and to this German government. Grateful for your efficiency in helping Ukraine, for your and your colleagues' efficiency in defending your country, and for the strength that you and all of Germany give to Europe. Brilliant German irises have already saved thousands of lives of our people from Russian missile terror. Powerful German martyrs are helping to protect the lives of our soldiers as they put pressure on the Russian occupiers. Sturdy German leopards provide us with the protection we need. And it is very important that Germany helps not only militarily, but also with its leadership in the economy, humanitarian sphere and diplomacy. Last year, Ukraine presented its 10 points of our formula for peace, and I believe that Germany will be one of the leaders in its implementation in the same way. This Russian aggression continues on our land. It is our people who are dying every day in the confrontation with this evil, which, by striking Ukraine, strikes at the very idea of a peaceful Europe, at the very idea of a rules-based international order based on rules. We see the evil, we see it, and we see the evil of aggression most very close up. And so we'll see the best way to defeat this evil, how to prevent its replication in other parts of the world or at other times. And we invite the world to join our just and fair principles of peace. Everyone who joins our formula of peace actually makes it their own. And I'm convinced that the Ukrainian formula of peace can become the German formula for peace, can become the European formula for peace, can become the world formula for peace. The only one who does not accept it is the aggressor. And that's why he does not accept that he is the aggressor. But the most important thing is that he's only one alone, and we're not afraid of him. And he does not accept it because he's not interested in peace. There were hundreds of rounds of negotiations between 2014 and 2022 in various formats with Russia after it occupied our Crimean Peninsula and after it fueled a hybrid war against Ukraine in Donbass. All these negotiations took place. And you, Olaf, Mr. Chancellor, and you remember that. And our ally, Mr. President of France, Mr. Emmanuel Macron, and all the conscientious leaders of the world spend hours and hours talking to Putin, trying to avert a catastrophe, this modern catastrophe. But Putin chose a disaster. Putin chose disaster. He alone. And now everyone understands what we understand. Putin is the catastrophe. That's the response. Putin is aggression. And he does not want anything else for himself and his people, anything else. But his formula has become death. What can we talk to him about now? How can you talk about it? In its long history, humanity has never known anyone who could negotiate with death. The one who brought death, the one who embarked on the path of genocide, the one who wants to destroy us, wants to destroy Europe, the Europe we value, must ask for mercy. And then our response to him will be the tribunal. Our common determination will lead to the fact that we will see also that Russia would show interest in our efforts for peace. This will happen, and that's when there is no source of death there. We're capable of winning, and we're bringing the victory closer. And this has been proven more than once by the tears of joy of children and adults, women and men, young and old, whom of our soldiers have liberated from Russian occupation. Everywhere where our blue and yellow flag returns to the liberated land, Europe returns. Our common Europe. The values come back. The values return that you, just like us, defended on your squares and enshrined in your constitutions. This is a fact that freedom for our people, whom Russia tried to enslave, is ensured by the bravery of our soldiers and the weapons, including yours, all of those who help us defend ourselves. That is why only weapons can stop death. And that's a fact. Therefore, we have to be firm and steadfast in support and help Ukrainian defenders. Very often, including here in Aachen, during the award ceremony of this prize, this honorable prize, it has been said that Europe should become one of the world's superpowers. Unlike other similar powers, Europe has this potential only when it is not something else but European unity that becomes a superpower. We see it now, the superpower of European unity. We see it thanks to Ukraine and thanks to each and every one of you. Thank you. We thank you. Your solidarity and leadership, dear colleagues, in particular your solidarity and leadership, Ursula, with which the European Union has responded to our courage, have reflected the basic principles that Robert Schuman, Konrad Adenauer and Jean Monnet wanted for Europe. They would be proud of each and every one of you who is defending Europe together with Ukraine. Ukrainian courage and your solidarity have given Europe have given Europe a unity it has never seen before. The time has come to consolidate the strength of our unity with the decision to join the European Union for Ukraine. And you know that Europe will not be complete without Ukraine in the European Union. And I thank you, Olaf. I thank every leader of Europe who supports the completion of the European project. There's no rational reason why our soldiers who have fought so heroically and successfully for our common freedom, for our common values, are not yet in the same organization as all other NATO soldiers. Judging by the results of our actions, Ukraine is already in the alliance, but the de jure decision has not yet been made. It is time to finally make this decision, and we need to define an algorithm for Ukraine's membership in NATO that motivates our soldiers. In addition to strengthening the entire Euro-Atlantic with the courage of Ukrainians, our joining the alliance will have another historic result. NATO flags next to Ukraine's on our eastern border will be the lock, powerful lock, that will keep Russian imperialism in the past forever. In the past, that cannot be returned, because without control over Ukraine, Russian imperialism is going to die. And one more prerequisite for our common victory, which Ukraine offers and proposes, the longest peace and the most reliable security in Europe has been ensured by building ties between the peoples of Europe instead of barriers. And when we see now that instead of strengthening our ties, any fresh barriers that are so reminiscent of old mistakes, whether they are barriers in politics or barriers in trade, then we see a threat not only to one European nation, but to the whole of Europe. Mateusz, I'm very grateful for the great support from Poland to Ukraine and for Ukraine. Thank you. And it's very important for us to keep this unity. Any spark of misunderstanding between anyone in Europe should not give rise to conflict. And this is in the fundamental interests of our nations. Europe gains in strength and prosperity every time there is a barrier subtracted on the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, today I've spoken only about what is needed for our common victory, and therefore only about what is needed for a sustainable peace for all of us. I dream of Europe becoming a winner. I know that Ukrainians can win. I call on all of you to become winners together with Ukrainians, together with us. This time has come. And it is now that it is decided how this war will end and whether this is indeed the last aggression in Europe. Everything depends on our unity. And only on this, on our speed, on our determination to win. So my appeal to you today is to be worthy of Charlemagne's character. Win. Establish peace, which will be the fruit of our common victory, and which we will leave to our children and grandchildren as the main heritage of Europe, our common heritage. And if anyone still has doubts about whether to support the Ukrainian people, please, here in Aachen or in any other city of our beautiful, free Europe, go outside. Please, go outside, look around you, and feel the main thing we want, the thing that gives us all peace and respect in Europe. Feel the freedom. It's just there. It's just there. And we are fighting for it. And we will be victorious. Glory to all our soldiers who are fighting for the sake of Ukraine at combat posts and in combat missions. Glory to all those who train Ukrainian soldiers. Glory to everyone who helps, who works, who fights. Ukraine will win. Europe will win. Peace will prevail. Glory to Ukraine.
З випаленими очима, з залізом в ключиці, жити далі потрібна вагома причина. І вона говорить йому, дивлячись в застиглі очниці: не хвилюйся, тепер я буду твоїми очима. Я завжди зможу дати якусь пораду.
Burnout eyes and an eye in your club. You need a good reason to live on. And she tells him, looking into his frozen eyes, don't worry, I'll be your eyes now. I will always be able to give you some advice. I will tell you what the weather is like. I love you too much to tell you a lie. Your ability to live is just a shame. And he feels that he has too much metal in his body. And he knows how dark it will feel for the rest of his life. And he hears the voices of those coming out of the station. And he finds a tear by touching a dead eyelid. And he says, then tell me what I don't see. What is the sky above us made of now? Tell me, how will you convince my blind soul? Tell me how you will negotiate with my dreams. You don't see, she says, how we're lacking in luck, how stubbornly the morning trams tread the path. And you don't see how old the people are you used to see, and how they forget about those who are gone. I can, she says, be as light as a breath, to be like a beast that will not hurt anyone. The only thing I can't do is to make you forget about your dead, so that you don't dream about those who will never come. And even if it lasts for years, even if the world hurts with every breath, be its breath and its hands, be his voice, be his laughter. You must now see for those who cannot see. You must now love for those who do not love. This winter, even the trees stand as if they're tired too, like people. Be an extension of his curled fingers. Be the end of his long sentences. The winter sky above you in the morning is made up of proofs and denials. Старий Жадан.